Die Sprachübertragung beginnt jetzt. Alle Teilnehmer befinden sich im Zuhörermodus.
Hello and welcome to this webinar. Our topic today is about the incoming invoice. Just quickly before I hand over to my colleague, there are some short important information. As usual, we've muted all of you, but of course you can always ask your questions by entering in the question area in your GoToWebinar control panel. My colleague will of course answer your questions at the end of the presentation. That's now basically all for my part, and we can start with the webinar session. So I hand over to my colleague Edgar Krassel. Welcome, Edgar. It's your turn.
Die Stummschaltung ist aufgehoben.
Well, warm welcome from Austria, and thanks for the introduction. Well, today I'm talking about the digitalization of incoming invoices. So when we look at our invoice process, then it's, well, everybody knows it. We get an invoice, then we approve the invoice, and then somewhere or when it gets paid. So that's the normal invoice process everybody knows and everybody has every day in his or her company. So what sounds so easy is, well, it's a little bit different, because there are some things that you have to consider when talking about incoming invoices. First of all, you have to think about how do you receive it? How do you receive your incoming invoices? Do you get an email with the invoice as a PDF, or do you get a letter, or do you have to download it, or maybe you get a fax or something? So this is in every company a little bit different, and maybe one invoice comes with an email, one invoice comes with a letter, and one invoice I have to download. So how do I receive my invoices? Next thing is, which format has my invoice? Is it in paper? Do I get it as a PDF, or do I get it as a XML file or some other files, or some other file formats, which, well, I maybe don't know. So this is one thing that you have to consider as well. And then there are the legal requirements. How is the tax law in your country? How long do you have to keep the invoice in your company or in your file cabinet or something, that you meet the legal requirements? So maybe the incoming invoice process is easy, but there are those things that you have to consider. When you get 30 incoming invoices a day in your company, then you get around 7,200 invoices a year. 30 invoices a day doesn't sound much. 7,200 a year, yeah, it's much higher. But out of those 7,200 invoices a year, there are on average 270 invoices in the approval process. And when you didn't have the time yet to digitize the approval process, when it's an analog process where the invoice as a paper is wandering around the company from one department to another, you won't know where those 270 invoices are. So if you're looking for one invoice, then you will have to wander around in the company as well. When you receive 500 invoices a day, then the number of invoices in the approval process is around 4,500. That's a huge amount of invoices. Nobody has the overview over 4,500 invoices, which are somewhere in the company. Nobody can say where one specific invoice is. So it's time to start with the digitalization of your incoming invoices. And when you start with the digitalization of your incoming invoices, then you will be prepared for the future. So why should you start with digitalization of your incoming invoices? In the past, we got invoices on paper. So as I said, 270 invoices on paper are somewhere in the company and nobody knows. So finding an invoice could be tricky. In the present, we get invoices as a PDF. Most of the time we get invoices as a PDF with an email. So the present is a little bit better than the past. We don't have to do much paperwork. We have electronic invoices in different formats, and we can work with them without printing them and then send them to the department where they should approve it. So it's much easier today working with invoices than it was in the past when we had them on paper. And in the future maybe, or not maybe, in the near future, we will receive only data. We don't have any documents anymore, no paper anymore. We don't get any PDFs anymore. We just will receive data from a service which maybe runs somewhere in I don't know where it will run. So we won't get documents, we will receive data. And when you didn't start with the digitalization of your incoming invoice process at the moment when you will receive data, then it will be different to work with them. So you will have to start with the digitalization to be prepared for the near future when you only receive data and no more documents, because you can't print the data out. Maybe you can, but it's a little bit different. So on the other hand, 91% of the employees work more efficient through digitalization. That's the reason for this may be that the process gets faster, that some tasks are automated and the people don't have to do some boring tasks every day. Thanks to digitalization, they can work more efficient because they have the tools for it. And on the other hand, the time reduced thanks to the digitalization is up to 30%. So your incoming invoice process will get faster up to 30%. It doesn't take, I think it takes on average 9 days. So after you start with the digitalization, it will take 6 to 7 days. So you get faster and the time gets reduced. You can use the time for more important tasks that you have to do. And to start with the digitalization of your incoming invoice process, there is the business solution ILO Invoice, which helps you with the digitalization. So what do you need to start with the digitalization? Of course, you need the ILO ECM suite. And you need the business solution ILO Invoice, because with the business solution ILO Invoice, you can extract the data from the existing invoices which you get. Let's say it's a PDF or something, or it is a scanned file. Then you can extract this data from there. Then you can start the approval process with the business solution ILO Invoice, where you can fill in some more data in the approval process, and then you can export the data that the invoice gets paid in time. So this is the only thing what you need for starting with the digitalization of your incoming invoices and ILO ECM suite and the business solution ILO Invoice. So how do we get the invoices in ILO? When we want to get them there, then it depends on how you get the invoices in your company. So when you get it through an email, then we can fetch it from the email server. So you have a an email address, let's say invoice@something.com, and when you receive an invoice into this to this email address, then we will get this email and we will take the invoice out and put it into our ELO. When you get it on paper, which, well, in Austria it gets, there are no more paper invoices. Well, there are some, but when you get some on paper, then, well, you have to scan it. And when you've scanned it, then we get it into our ELO. You can fetch it from the file system as well when you have to download a invoice from somewhere else, from a organization or from the government or something, and you can download your invoice. Then we fetch the invoices from the file system and store it into our ELO. Or you have some interfaces to some services. There are some services, for example, in Austria, this is a service from the government where you can download your data, no more documents, just only the data, and you can use an interface to access those data and download them to your business solution ELO invoice. So when we got the invoice into our ELO, then we, in the first step, store it. We store it in a way where the invoice can't be changed anymore. The document itself can't be changed, so that we meet the legal requirements. Next step is we extract the data from the invoice. And that depends on the file format or the format how we received the invoice. When we receive a scanned invoice, then we have to use an additional tool to extract the data. This tool makes an OCR over the document and extracts the data which are contained in our invoice. When you receive, let's say, some e-invoicing file format standard, like I think in Germany it's called Zugpferd, then we extract the data which are contained in the PDF. So the PDF comes with some XML data which we can read out. When we receive only data, then we take those data. We don't have to extract them. Then next step is we check the legal requirements. So there's some legal requirements which are common, I think, in every country. There has to be an invoice number, there has to be an invoice date, a sender, recipient, and so on. But there are different requirements in different countries. So Austria and Germany have nearly similar requirements for invoices, but maybe in France or in, I don't know, Poland, there are other requirements for an invoice which we can check, which we usually know what the legal requirements for an invoice are. And only if the check for the legal requirements is passed, the invoice goes to the next step. So in the past, I had some customers which sent me some invoices to extract the data and check the whole document. And I told them that this is not an invoice, because our system said it's not an invoice. On one, I think there was no invoice number, or the bank account was missing, or something else. So the system checks if the requirements are met, and when they are met, then the invoice goes to the next step. The next step is we compare the data. When we get the data out of our invoice, then we look in a, let's say, ERP system or some other database which we can access, so that we can say, well, this sender is in our database, and maybe we have an order number on it, and we have a database with the order items. Then we check if the invoice is the same like the order from the order number. So when this comparison is passed, when we find the right data on the invoice, then the invoice goes to the approval process. When there's some difference, or when, let's say, the company name is written in another way than we have stored it, then it goes to the correction workplace. In the correction workplace, there sits an employee which corrects the extracted data, which maybe are wrong, or the system doesn't find the sender, or doesn't find the order number, or something else. So there's an employee for this, and he or she can correct it, and he or she can say, well, this invoice is correct, but the company name is written in another way, and you can correct it, and then you can send it to the approval process. Or the employee says, no, the invoice is not correct, and then sends it back to the sender, and, well, maybe he sends you a new invoice, or well, no, in the normal way, he will send you a new invoice. And then we start the approval process. And in the approval process, we start with a formal check. So you have your invoice. The system has made some sort of formal check in the first step. But in the approval process, you can look into the data, and you can compare them, and you can correct them if necessary. So this is the first step. The second step is, when the first step is approved, the department check. So you have to say who is responsible for this invoice, who made the order for the invoice, and in the next step you will send the invoice to the right department, that they can check the invoice and can say, well, yes, it fits to our order or something, and they can approve it as well. The next step is, you can post to the accounts. So you can post the whole invoice to an account, or you can post some specific positions on the invoice to some accounts. You can split positions and so on. So this is the third step. You can post it to the accounts, and then you can export the invoice, and you can use it in some other application to pay the invoice, or to, well, make some further actions with the data, and then you pay it, or something else. And in every step, you have the possibility to send the invoice to a clearing center, where the invoice will be cleared with the sender of the invoice when there's something not right, when some checks didn't or couldn't be approved. So you have a clearing center where the invoice is sent to when something is missing, when something is wrong. And what can you do during the approval process? The most important thing is you can complete the data. In every step of the approval process, you get a form where you can fill in or change some data. So, for example, when you want to post to the accounts for single positions, then you can do it during the approval process. You can send an approval process to different departments in your company. For this, you have to fill in the data, which department you will send this invoice, and so on. The big target at the end is that you have a that you can export the completed data with the export file to a third application, so that you just have to pay it there or something else. You can do the account assignment in the approval process, and you can approve the invoice. So you can approve the invoice in a way that you can say in, let's say, 5 years, who said that the invoice is correct, who said that we shall pay this invoice, and so on. The approval process is, it gets locked so that you can see at the end of the day how long did it take, and who said when yes or no, and who filled out which data, and so on. So those are the points which you can do during the approval process. And in the end, at the end of the day, you get an export. And the export, it's a file which you can use for other applications where you want to pay, or where you can pay your invoice. And the export data is the result out of the approval process with the filled in data, with the account information, and so on. So you have a whole export file which you can use in a third-party application where you have to pay your invoice, or where you have to do or where you need the accounting information. And the most recent point why you should do this is this one. This is the dashboard from our business solution Elo Invoice, which gives you an overview over your 270 invoices that are in the approval process in the company. And how this looks like and how you can work with this I'll show you now. So what we see here is our Elo client. In our Elo client, we have the possibility to access the invoice dashboard through this tile. So with this tile, I open my invoice dashboard and I see my invoices in the company which have different states. So what you see here is the number of invoices in the state of the capture. There's the amount of the invoices. So those are, I think, 5. We have 32, which are in the formal check. We have 76 in the department check. We have 17 in the post to account state, and 2 wait for the export. 3 are exported, and 400 and something are booked. And with 1 invoice where clarification is needed, and with 0 invoices which are rejected. So there's no invoice which are rejected. And how do they get in there? Well, as I said before, in different ways. When you get it through an email, we extract the invoice out of the email, and to do the data extraction and legal requirements check and comparison with my existing data, which normally takes, let's say, 1 minute or something. And when everybody fits and when everybody is clear, then the invoice gets to the next step, to the formal check. When something isn't clear, then it gets to the correction workplace. And when you select an invoice, then you see here the invoice data, which are stored in a form. We can see here the invoice data, where the description, the document type, the company to which the invoice was sent, the vendor with the vendor number, which comes from my ERP system in this case, vendor name, and so on. So those data were found on the invoice and were found in my ERP system. So that's the reason why they are here. Then you have the invoice data with the invoice number, the invoice date, the delivery date, and so on. And as I said, you have to select the department or the person who has ordered the, no, who, you don't order an invoice, who made the order for this invoice. So here you can select a group or a user out of a list. Let's say, well, Bodo Kraft has ordered this invoice. So that's an example for filling out data in the approval process. On the next ribbon, we see the tax law requirements for this invoice. And this particular invoice, well, it's not compliant. It's not, I can tick it as well. Then there are the item data, which you can see here. And as I said, you can post the item data to a cost center, to a cost object, and so on, just by filling out the right data. But this will be done in a step later on. And here the footer data as well. So this is an example for an invoice in my company. When you want to access the content, when you want to access or want to see the invoice itself, then you can do it here by clicking on content. When you're looking for a specific invoice, then you can type in a name, a company name or something, or you can type in a date as well. And then you get the selection filtered to the right company. So here we have two invoices from the Conrad Electronic SE, and we can see in which state those invoices are. They are both in the departmental verification state. So they have passed the first step, and now they are in the second step. So when we look at our dashboard, then we have the possibility to filter the invoices as well by state. So it's not only possible to filter them by name, you can select or deselect, in my case, those positions, and when only the formal check invoices are active, then I see every invoice which is in the state of the formal check. And what you see here, the bars here, they change as well when you select more invoices. Then you can see who are my top 5 vendors by quantity, by net amount, and by discount amount. And here we would see the invoices which have to be paid in, I think it's this week. Yes, this week, next week, and so on. So that's an overview. How much do you have to pay in the next, how much is this? 8 weeks? Yes. So you get an overview over the invoices in your company, which are in the approval process. When you have imported the invoice into your ELO business solution, then the workflow or the approval process starts automatically. So you don't have to do anything with it when the first steps with the data extraction and the legal requirements and the comparison with the existing data is done, which, as I said, takes a minute or so. Then the approval process starts for itself, and you don't have to do anything with it. Well, maybe you have to do anything with the process itself, but you don't have to start it. So what I have done in the morning today is I sent 2 invoices into the approval process just by starting the verification or the data extraction. one did I start with a folder in the file system, and one did I start with an email. So what happened then? The data were extracted, the comparison and the requirements check was made, and now they are on their way in the approval process, which you can see here. This one was the first one. It was 3 hours ago. It's a e-invoice. That means it's a PDF where the data are stored as an XML, I think, with the PDF, so we can read them out as well. There's some more standards in every country around the world, which are, well, pretty similar, but the file format or the format how the data are stored are different. So in Germany, it's Zugpferd. In Austria, I think it's e-invoice or something. Well, I had a list today, but I can't find it. Chile has a standard. Poland has a standard. So every country has some sort of different e-invoicing standard, which we normally can read, or we can make the system able to read it. So this was the first invoice which I sent to my system. It was a e-invoice with this standard. The second one was a just a paper invoice which I sent to our ELO doc extractor, which extracted my data and compared the data to my existing system. And well, the doc extractor said it's okay. So now it's in my approval process. And when it's in my approval process, then I will get some tasks if I am part of the process. In this case, I am part of the process so that I can show you how this works. The first one, the ELO Academy invoice, is in the first step in the formal check. And what you can see here is that I have to accept this task to edit it, because the task was sent to a group. So I think in this group there are 3 or 4 members, and everybody has this task in his or her task section. And so you can make sure that everybody can see this task. The first one who is selecting the accept workflow button is the winner, and the others don't see the task anymore in their tasks section. So as I said, we are in the first step. We are in the formal check. Here are the values which we found with our ELO doc extractor. And the first thing that I have to do, I have to say, well, I have ordered it for myself so that I get the next step in the approval process as well. And here I can say for approval. So in the next step, I will get the task again because I am the one who ordered this. Or you can say to the clearing center, because as I showed you before, in the clearing center, you can send the email there and they will check it with the vendor and maybe correct it or something, or they will get a new invoice or something else. So, but this one, it is correct. And I showed them, or I told the system who has ordered this who is the one who made the order for this invoice, and I'll send it to the approval. So now it is away out of my task section, but it will come later on. The second invoice, that's the one which is with, or which comes with the e-invoice standard, is in the next step, because where do we see it? I was the one who ordered this, and now I am in the second step. I have to do the department check. So same as before, the task was sent to a group and I have to accept the workflow as well. So, but now I see some different form. I don't see the whole information as we saw before with the tax law ribbon and so on. I only see those information which are necessary for me. And here I can, this one I can't edit anymore. So because this was checked in the previous state or in the previous task, I only can edit those positions here or the items here in the item data section. When I make it a little bit wider, then you can see anything. So, and here I can say, well, I'll edit the cost center. I can select out of a list. Let's say it's material. You can select the cost object. You can, you can select general ledger account. Or when I want to split one item, then I can do it here. So let's say this position shall be splitted to 3 departments which have different parts on it. Then I can do it like this. And then you see we have one item which is splitted to 3 items. So I can do different cost centers or something. So this is what you can do here, what you can do later on as well. And here you can send it to a different group or a different member for the approval process. So it is some sort of flexible, because when you say, well, I have split this to 3 different departments or something, then you can send it to them for the approval. You can select out of a list and you can say, well, I want to send it to the accounting group, and I want to send it to the marketing or something. So it depends on which groups in your company exist, but you can send the approval process to different departments, to different groups, or even to different users. So when I say, and Bodo Kraft shall have a look on it as well, then I can send it to him. And everybody out of those 3, so this group and this group and this employee, will get a task in the task section, and they have to approve the invoice as well. This you can automate in some sort. So when you say, well, when the invoice has an amount that's more than 15,000 euros or something, then you can add a step where you say, well, the CEO has to look on the invoice as well, and he has to approve it in the last step so that we can pay the invoice. What you can do as well with the steps, you can add a deadline. So an employee has 3 days that he can end this task, and when the 3 days are gone, then he will get an email. And when he didn't approve it in the next 5 days, then my supervisor will get an email or something else. So you can make the whole invoice process much faster with those things. So, and what we see here, my invoice, my first invoice has come back to me because she was on the way through the whole system, and I found the way back. So as we saw before, we now see here the department check, and we only have to, in this case, we should add some items or something. So in the approval process, we see the information from the invoice, but only those informations which are relevant for me. I don't see the legal check. I don't see the footer data anymore. I just see my item data, which I can split, which I can with which I can work, or I can even add some new lines, and so on. So in the next step, in the third step, maybe we'll get another view where we just, I think the next check is the post to accounts check, yes, where we just see the accounting data and no more who has ordered this and so on. So as I said, we have a dashboard where we get an overview that's better than before, where you had to do the paperwork and where you had to find some papers, where you had to walk around many times. You can find your invoices very easy. You see which invoice is in which step or which state of the approval process. And when they are exported, then you can reuse the data which we extracted, which the employees filled out, the accounting information, some other information, and you don't have to do any manual work anymore. So the highlights of our business solution, Elo Invoice. First thing, you have a dashboard for an overview. You can search your invoices by state or by name or by date or something. So you know where your invoice is. You even can say in which task section the invoice is lying, or who has to end the task. So you can grab the phone and call the employee and say, well, hey, I need to pay this invoice. Please approve it, or something. So you have an overview where your invoices are. You can't forget any invoice anymore. The approval process gets much faster with the digitalization, with the business solution Elo Invoice. As I said, you can set some deadlines for some steps, or when you send the tasks to groups, then you can make sure that somebody ends the task, because somebody in this group is responsible for this invoice and has to approve the invoice, or has to post to the accounts or something else. So the process itself gets faster, because the people have forms where they can fill it in. We reuse data which already exist. So maybe when you have a invoice with an order number on it, and you have the order data stored in your ERP system, then it's much faster, because we compare this to that. So the invoice to the order, and when the invoice fits to the order, you can, well, maybe you can when you can send it to the booking, or you can export it when it's ready. So the process gets faster with automation and workflows and the forms. It's customizable, that it fits to your needs, because, well, you can use the business solution as it is. Some years ago, we had two customers in Austria. One took the business solution Elo Invoice as it was. So he said, well, it fits pretty much to me. I don't want to change anything, because the forms fit, the workflows fit. We just had to do some customization on the workflows that the groups were right. But they use it as it was. So they are happy until now. They are always happy with our solution. And the second customer said, well, no, it's I want more fields where the people can type something in. I want to change the workflow. I want to add some steps in the workflow, and we have some external companies and so on. So they have customized it as they needed it, and both have the solution which fits to them. And both have digitized the incoming invoice process, which now is much faster than before. It is secure digital filing. You meet the legal requirements for the data storage of incoming invoices. So, well, I only can tell for Austria, and I think in Germany it's the same. You have to store it in a way that nobody can change the document in itself, where nobody can delete the document, and you have to make sure that the document doesn't get lost or something. And you have to make sure that you can read the document in Austria it's 7 years, in Germany it's 10 years. So that's the retention time for an invoice, 7 years, and after the 7 years, you can delete the invoice out of your repository. So this is something what the ILU ECM suite can do. We can file it in a way that nobody can change it, that you can read it in 7 or 10 years, and nobody can delete, and and the document can't get lost. You meet the legal requirements. So it's revision controlled, it's compliant invoice management. The legal requirements in every country are pretty the same, but in details they're different. So as I said, retention time in Austria is 7 years, in Germany it's 10 years. Maybe someone has 12 years or something else, but we meet the legal requirements when we know the legal requirements, and we can customize it in a way that we can meet it if we don't know the requirements. But most of the time we know. And you're prepared for the future. As I said, in the past, we got invoices on paper. Now we get invoices through email as a PDF, maybe with the data stored in the PDF so that we can read it out much easier. But in the future, in the near future, we won't get documents anymore. We just will receive data, and well, we have to find a way that we can read the data which we receive. So with the business solution ILU Invoice, you can read the data because we know which data belongs to which field in the form, and you have the form where you see who's the vendor, who has ordered it, what's the bank account number, and so on. So you are prepared for the future when there are no more documents, when there are just data. This is one thing the business solution Invoice can do for you now and for the future. There's some other business solutions which you can use for the digitalization, not for the invoice process. That's the business solution ILU Invoice for your invoice management, but there is a business solution for contract management, for personnel files, for the recruiting process, for the training management, records management, knowledge management, and visitor management, which you can use as well. So you can expand your ILU ECM suite with the business solutions, and they work together pretty fine. And well, you can expand the functionality of your ILU ECM suite. So when you need any advice for the digitalization of your incoming invoice process, then you can find your ILU business partner in the link which is behind this QR code, or on our homepage ilu.com, where you can use the partner finder to find a business partner which is near to you and who can help you with the digitalization of your incoming invoice process. So that's the last slide, I think. Well, yes, it's the last slide. I want to thank you for your attention, and if there are any questions, then you can ask me now in the question section of the webinar thing, or you can ask your business partner and he or she will help you as good as I could. So there has appeared one question. Oh, second question. So can extract tool recognize items inside invoice like product number, description? Yes. When the question is if the extraction tool can extract the positions in contained in the invoice. Yes, it can. It can extract the product number, the description, the quantity, the price, and so on. And you can use it in the business solution invoice to manage the item data. So they will be sent to the item data section, which we saw in the second approval step, so that you can work with them. Yes, it can. Good. When there are no more questions, then I say thank you for your attention and see you next time.
Die Stummschaltung ist aktiviert.
Thank you, Eka, for your great presentation. Before we reach the end of this webinar session, I would like to inform you about our next upcoming webinars. The next webinar is about the ELO integration client next week on Friday. Also, the next webinar is on the 29th September about the business solution ELO invoice. And the webinar about ELO analytics is on the 8th October. Now we're at the end of the webinar. Thank you for taking part and your attention. Have a nice day and goodbye.